So just before, just a bit of a context, this lecture is joined to the School of Computer Science and Institute for Advanced, Israeli Institute for Advanced Studies. The Institute runs a winter school, which we are not able to run this year, and part of it is the Rabin lecture. And I'll ask the director of the Institute to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Moshe, and welcome everybody to the Zoom meeting of the Israeli Institute for Advanced Studies. Each year, the Institute hosts 6 advanced school for PhD and postdoc students in theoretical physics, life sciences, mathematics, economic theory, humanities, and our latest edition is the school in computer science and engineering. Unfortunately, we couldn't welcome you all this year in the building of the Institute, but we decided not to postpone the Rabin lecture of this year and to hold it in Zoom. And hopefully next year we'll be able to have you all in Jerusalem. So without much ado, I'll pass the baton to Moshe to introduce our speaker. Please, Moshe, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce my good colleague and friend, Silvio Micali. Silvio, his bio started in 1983 at MIT, but I remember him as a graduate student at Berkeley when I was a postdoc at Stanford, a long time ago. His research interests are cryptography, zero knowledge, pseudo-random generation, secure protocols, mechanism design, and blockchain. And he has received the Turing Award for a contribution to cryptography, in particular to zero knowledge proofs. In 2017, he founded Algorand, a fully decentralized, secure, and scalable blockchain, which provides a common platform for building products and services for a borderless economy. And today he's going to tell us about Algorand, truly distributed blockchain. So let's all welcome Silvio Micali.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, let me try to share screen.
I just want to say a few words that Michael Rabin sent his personal regards. He has technical difficulties, unable to attend the lecture, but he's sending you his greetings.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much, Moshe, for the nice invitation, and thank you, Isaac, for starting. Despite the pandemic, the series, to continue the series. I think science cannot be taken hostage by a pandemic. We'll get over that, and I very much, particularly happy to deliver this lecture also because is correctly so in the name of Michael Rabin. And in fact, I'd like to send a big hug virtually for now to both Michael and Ruth, to both of you, and hopefully a real hug in person very, very soon. And in fact, indeed in Jerusalem. This picture was taken in Jerusalem a few years back. So today I'm going to talk about blockchains. And by the way, I believe that you guys will recognize some of your work here because blockchain is the epitome of distributed computation, and somehow the Israeli school has been extremely prominent in this field, and Michael in particular. In fact, Michael, I hope you can listen to this lecture because you recognize not one but two of your work, and let me start now a little bit from the beginning. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the aspiration. Recall everybody aspiration of a blockchain, where it is a decentralized database that is readable by anyone, writable by anyone, and inalterable by anyone. I mean, the potential of blockchains are essentially unlimited. Who does not like a database that cannot be altered? Who does not like transparency? Who does not like the ability to generate trust between people who don't even know each other. But however, blockchains are somehow, there is a very basic tension between aspiration and technology. And somehow, as humans, it's only very proper that we raise our bar. We should aspire to more and more. That's our nature. But at some point in time, unless we sustain our aspiration with some real technology, they are going to remain a pie in the sky, to use an American expression. So in blockchains, the aspirations were indeed so strong that they ran ahead of us, and somehow to the point that they turn into self-deception. So take cover, there is a big wave of decentralization is upon us. I mean, journalists, consultants, sociologists, anthropologists, the general public got convinced that decentralized blockchains were readily available. Where? Somehow, I mean, for many years, I must tell you, I couldn't find a distributed blockchain anywhere. And just John, listen to me, Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum, famously stated the blockchain trilemma, according to which you cannot have simultaneously decentralization, security, and scalability. You can enjoy at most two. Well, if this is really the case, which one do you want to exclude? Who wants an insecure blockchain? Nobody. Who wants a blockchain who is not scalable? Maybe somebody wants to go through the trouble of setting up a blockchain just to interact with his friends and family. And if you're not interested in decentralization, why are you interested in a blockchain? Essentially, there are no good options in the trilemma. The trilemma simply is not acceptable. Fortunately, it's false. So it has been empirically true for a decade or so. And for the first 2000 and change examples of blockchain. How come? Meaning, how come that the trilemma was believed true, in fact obvious, for so long? Nathan, how are you? Good to see you. Sorry for the interruption. Hi. So what makes this impossibility look so obvious? So what is the challenge with a blockchain? Turns out it is not securing the chain, meaning there is no difficulty in ensuring that you cannot change the content of a block or the order of a block. The real challenge, believe it or not, is in choosing the next block. Who should choose the next block? If it were up to me, if I had this power to choose the next block, I would have more power than Louis XIV, perhaps the quintessential absolute monarch, because I'm going to have the power to decide which transactions should be seen by the entire world and which transactions should never see the light of day. So let's see this question how has been answered historically by the prior blockchain. The first approach of choosing the next block is the famous proof of work put forward by Nakamoto, V Nakamotos, how many there are, and is a very interesting approach, I must say. Athoff is a very original idea. The idea is that it should not be me, it should not be Nathan, it should not be Moshe, but rather we are going to set up a computational game. We put forward a very complex cryptographic riddle, and the first one of us who can solve it has the right to append the next block on the blockchain on behalf of all of us. Sounds great, and he was a great idea, but it was the first idea, and he ultimately led to centralization. Why? Because the cryptographic riddle became so hard that you needed to have thousands and thousands of computers in very refrigerated rooms and specialized hardware also, that very fewer and fewer people could afford the expense to append the next block. And so if you look at the Bitcoin on even days is controlled by 3 mining pools, on odd days by 2 mining pools. So eventually it started being decentralized, but essentially it became ultimately centralized. All right, next idea. Next idea is a delegated proof of stake. What does it mean? Or is a simple idea. Essentially means, you see those 21 people? Don't they look honest? Yes, they do. And let me tell you more. They look so honest that I'm going to bet that they're going to remain honest in the foreseeable future. So why don't we let them choose the next block on behalf of all of us? Wait a minute. Is 21 decentralized? Not at all. Speaking of the French Revolution and Louis XIV, which preceded it, of course, there were not 21 nobles in France. There were millions, but there were many more oppressed people. So Bitcoin became centralized, but delegated proof of stake starts centralized, is centralized, and will remain centralized. Etc., etc., etc. I don't have the time to go through a lot of all various proposals, but I want to share with you somehow the common flaw that I seen in this prior design. And there are common flaw in logic and in consensus. So in the process of agreeing on what the next block is. Let me start with the flawed logic. The logic goes as follows. The whole economy is secure if the majority of a small piece of the economy are honest. Sounds puzzling? Well, because it is. So essentially what he says is the following. Here is the whole big circle of the economy. And here is this little green dot representing the small piece whose honesty we depend on. You don't see it? Let me enlarge it with you. It's still very small. So who are these small pieces? They are the miners in Bitcoins. They are the delegates in delegated proof of stake, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm asking you, in the global GDP, what is the fraction of the global GDP represented by Bitcoin miners? So are you kidding me? You cannot see with a magnifying glass. You need an electronic microscope to blow them out. Essentially, any system that puts the whole economy at the mercy of a minuscule portion of the economy is set up for disaster. All right, and now for consensus. So you know the rule, or at least you learn it very quickly right now. The rule is you should elongate the longest chain that you see. And if I see a tie, if you see a fork, so-called, well, if there is a tie, choose a random one and append your block here. Okay. And so, and here are the people who can append blocks, minor, delegates, whomever. So this blue guy, he should elongate the longest chain, but somehow he elongates 2 from the frontier. And this red guy follows suit and appends something to BK plus 1 prime. And why is this? Well, for instance, you should elongate the longest branch that is valid. So for instance, if you believe that BK plus 1 is valid, you should append your blue block to BK, not to BK plus 1. And similarly for BK prime. Or you say, well, I didn't see it somehow, perhaps BK prime, while it was circulating around the planet Earth, it didn't get to me yet in time, so I didn't see it. Or you're simply bad and you want to bypass a branch, for instance, because either you or your friends or your relatives have a big payment that you want to erase. Okay. And so what happens to, at this point, the black guy elongates the other thing, and you have now a longer branch, and the instruction is elongate the branch below rather than the branch above. Whatever happens to the branch above, to the shortest branch, it dies, so it vanishes. And by the way, with it, they vanish all the payments made to you if you happen to be paid over there. So can you ship the goods when a payment made to you appears on the blockchain with such a flawed consensus? I don't think so, because you want to ship the goods when you know that the block with your payment will never leave the blockchain. In other words, you cannot rely on a block and the transaction it contains until more and more blocks are added to it, so that you get some notion that is going to be very hard now to yank out this block from the chain. Essentially, this approach to consensus is diluted and is actually eventual consensus. So it's a drip, 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 drip process that will converge and leave you the chain somewhere at an unspecified amount of time in the future. All right. So when I started looking at a blockchain for the first time, I saw this logic I didn't like. I saw this approach to consensus. I didn't like it either. But you know what? It's always easier to criticize than doing. So I decided, what about we somehow roll up our sleeves and get to work and do an alternative design? And so that's what we did. And after a few months of monk work, segregated work, now we had an alternative blockchain built from first principles with some advanced technology. Because the technology of solving a riddle and adding it is at least very simple, but doesn't cut it. And so we decided to go from scratch because very often it is easier to start from ground zero than to patch something that already does not work. Okay, so I told you the logic that I didn't like. What is the Algorand logic? It's very simple. It says every token has the same power as over any other token. So it's not that the tokens of the miners are worth more than my token or yours. No, every token has the same power. Delegates, not delegate, anyone. And the security goes like this. If most tokens are in honest hands, then the system is secure, period. Okay, so in other words, let me put another way. Who has the power to sync Algorand? Well, we should get together, collude, so to get a majority of token holders, and then sync the very ship whose majority we own, which perhaps is not a very smart thing to do. Somebody can say, excuse me, wouldn't it be better to guarantee that everything functions when no one follows the rule? Yes, in your dreams. Similarly, it's always better to be handsome, smart, rich, and ever young. But if you can actually manage to get 3 out of 4 of this qualification, you are very lucky. So Algorand logic is a way better than putting the whole economy at the mercy of a small piece of economy. And now for consensus. Consensus works like this. Everybody agrees on the latest block before generating the next one. Okay? What does this mean? Here is Algorand in action. And behold block 1. Block 1 is the genesis block. That is the only block that in a blockchain we agree upon, because it's part of the very description of the system. Next to it, you find a favor, perhaps a universal symbol of lightness and effortlessness. And as this favor effortlessly falls to the ground, the Algorand blockchain unfolds block by block by block in a linear fashion, as a blockchain should be. They say, well, Silvio, isn't this too easy? What happens to forks? What happens to proof of work? Guess what? There are no forks in Algorand, and there is no proof of work. And what does this mean? This means no forks means transaction finality. As soon as a block is added to the chain, you can rely on its transaction right away, because that block is not going to disappear at all. And what does it mean that there is no proof of work? It means easy participation. Everybody can and is indeed welcome to participate to consensus. After all you need is a laptop and off you go to the races. So, and I said that we agree on a block before generating the next one. And what type of agreement? Byzantine agreement. I must say there are some good advantages of being old, and that is that I lived at a time in which this Byzantine agreement was actually originally defined by Lamport, Peace, and Shostak. And as you know, is really the strongest notion of consensus in a most adversarial setting. I'm not talking about Byzantine fault tolerance, all kinds of play of words to make you believe you're dealing with Byzantine agreement while you deal with something much weaker instead. I mean, Byzantine agreement as originally defined on the nose. And what is it? It is a communication protocol played by a bunch of people. And if the majority of these people are honest, they guarantee two fundamental properties: agreement and consistency. Let me drive you it. What does agreement mean? Everybody starts that conversation with some value in his or her mind. And at the end of a conversation, agreement means that even though we all start with different value, at the end, all honest people agree on a common value. And you can see in this picture who is honest and who is not. But wait a minute. There is a second property. The second property means, just in case everybody started with the same value, then not only at the end of a conversation we should agree on a common value, but we should agree on the very value which everybody started with. In other words, if no matter what the value is in your head, you agree on 0, yes, ma'am, okay, we have agreement, but you don't have consistency, because if everybody started with, say, 27, we should agree on 27, not on 0. So these are two properties. If you see them from the first time, they sound good, but it's not immediately clear how powerful they are, but they are very powerful. And let me tell you a little bit what is the role they play in a blockchain. What are these values which are in my head, in your head, and everybody else's head? They are what the next block I think ought to be, what you think is, and what she thinks is, and so on and so forth. Okay, so at the end, we want to agree on what the next block is. Say, gee, when you're done, right? So presumably, and that is indeed the case, not only there is a definition of Byzantine agreement, there are also protocols. Let's take a plug in whatever Byzantine protocols we have, and that's how we are going to append blocks on a blockchain. Yes, but there are challenges. What are the challenges? Byzantine agreement is very slow. Define slow. In any practical applications, the maximum number of participants conceived was 12. 12? We want to allow consensus among billions of people. And second of all, the player set ought to be fixed and known in advance. What? In a permissionless blockchain over the internet where people come and go? Neither of these two tenets applies. Yet, make no mistake, Algorand works because he has developed a new consensus mechanism that delivers Byzantine agreement on a planetary scale and unparalleled efficiency. I must confess that I don't have the time to guide you through it, but I wish to share with you the general architecture of the system. How do we generate a block in Algorand? I'd like to describe it in a magical way, because the magic will later on be replaced by mathematics. But we must agree that even among mathematicians or theoretical computer scientists, magic is a little bit easier to deal with than mathematics. So the blocks are generated in two phases. The first phase is the proposal phase, and it goes as follows. A random token is selected among all tokens in circulation. How? By magic. Excellent. Well, this token must belong to some public key. By magic, that public key shines and becomes known to everybody in the system. Well, this public key must belong to somebody. That somebody proposes a new block, digitally signs it, and propagates it through the network. Behold my proposed block. End of phase one. Phase two is the agreement phase. How does it go? Well, 1,000 tokens are, by magic, selected among all tokens in circulation. The public key that they own them, by magic becomes common knowledge to all users. And the owners of these public keys essentially agree and digitally sign on the block proposed by the first user. So, you go, gee, why do you want to have two phases? Isn't the first phase good enough? Not really. And here is why. In any society, and a blockchain is no exception, there is some percentage of bad actors, criminals if you want. How many are the criminals in a society? Hopefully very small, 0.5%, 1%, 2%. If you live in a very dangerous society, 10%. I mean, with a 10% criminal around, never leave home, okay? So it's a very dangerous out there. So if 10% of the tokens were in criminal hands, 10% of the time, the block is proposed by a criminal. And what can the criminal do? He cannot suck out my money because he needs my digital signature to spend my money. But he can tell me the next block is X. He can tell Moshe the next block is Y. He can tell Michael the next block is Z, thereby generating discord of what the chain ought to be. That's why we need the second phase. And in the second phase, whatever block or multiplicity of blocks a proposer may have, if it is malicious, as put forward, we agree on a single one. Because now there is 1,000 people here. And they say, well, but 10% are bad people. Okay, the 10% are bad people, but the probability that there is a 10% bad people out there, and you choose 1,000 tokens at random, that the majority of these tokens belong to bad people is so small that you can bet your life on it. That is the idea. The idea is that, of course, if you do some probabilistic analysis, one person could be malicious, but to have a dishonest majority when there is actually a very strong honest majority out there among 1,000 tokens, that is a very, very small. So once these people agree on the block and they digitally sign a block, and you see, say, that these 1,000 tokens are, say, owned by 1,000 different people, and you see one block digitally signed, say, by 800 of them, then you know that is going to be the next block, period. Right? That he says. Gee, Silvio, thank you very much. I appreciate this general architecture, but I have a question. A question, in fact, you should have many questions. But the most popular one appears to be the following. I understand that everything works because there is an honest majority in this random selected committee. But who chooses the committee? And it is not going to be me, by the way, but in Algorand, something a little bit very unorthodox occurs. Namely, the committee members choose themselves. What? The committee members choose themselves? That is a terrible idea, perhaps one of the worst ideas I ever seen. Because if I'm bad, of course, I select myself to be in the committee of this block and the one after and the one after and so on and so forth, because I want to have as much power as I can have in selecting the next block, in controlling the blockchain. But not so fast. What does it mean that you select yourselves in Algorand? That means that each one of us, in the privacy of his own laptop, runs a cryptographic lottery. This lottery is cryptographically fair, meaning that even if you have not a computer, but millions of them, huge computational power, you cannot increase the probability of being selected in this lottery, period. And think of it, you have a lever of a slot machine, a cryptographic slot machine whose lever you can pull down only once. And after you pull the lever, two things may occur. One, you don't win. In such a case, you can say whatever you want. You are not part of the committee. Nobody pays attention to what you say. Case two, you win. But in this case, not only you win, but you also get a winning ticket, namely a mathematical proof that it can be short and easy to inspect, that convinces everybody that you are indeed a legitimate member of this 1,000 strong committee. So what do? You pull the lever, and if you win, you propagate your winning ticket and your opinion about the block, up or down. That's how it works. And by the way, that's where Michael comes in, because what is this cryptographic slot machine? What is this cryptographic thing? Is a revival random function that is an old concept that Michael, I, and Vadan put forward in Fox 2000. And by the way, in that paper, we also wrote somewhere, says, even though this appears to be a theoretical notion, we believe it's going to have practical applications. Right, we were. It took just a few more years, a few decades or so to find this application. Because you can see that you have this function. Everybody has a public key. Everybody has a secret key. I can somehow produce my ticket because I have my secret key. And this random ticket either is a winning ticket or not. And is random. I cannot control the odds, even though I'm the owner of a public key. But everybody can check whether I won or not, based on what I say. That's roughly is the idea. All right. Let me now show that this way of proceeding is very decentralized. Because, every token has the same power. In Algorand, there are 10 billion tokens. Every token has the same chance to win the lottery. Okay? So more decentralized than this, you cannot get. Let me now argue that the system is super scalable. What does that mean? That means that how long does it take to pull down the lever for the cryptographic lottery? 1 microsecond. Wait a minute, 1 microsecond per token. But if you have 1 billion tokens, you have to pull down the lever 1 billion times. 1 billion microseconds is considerable amount of time. No, by adding a few more magic, a little more magic, namely a little bit of more math, you can actually ensure that in 1 microsecond, you run the lottery for each one of your tokens, no matter how many you have, even if you have 1 billion. So 1 microsecond is very small time. And if you win, what do you have to do? To propagate winning tickets, as many you have, and your opinion about the block. Can we propagate 2 short messages? Yes, that's it. That's why it's super scalable. Now let me argue that the system is super secure. Assume that I am a very scary guy, not only scary, but very powerful too. I'm so powerful that I can corrupt any 1,000 people on Earth at the snapping of my fingers. Whom do I want to corrupt? Well, the members of the committee, because I want to control the blockchain. But I have a problem. I do not know whom I should corrupt. Should I corrupt this lady in Shanghai? Should I corrupt this guy in Jerusalem? I have no idea, because the members of the committee randomly selected themselves, and until they come forward with their winning ticket and their opinion about the block, I don't even know who they are. Sure, but after they come forward with their winning ticket, now I know who they are, and now I can corrupt them. Yes, but so what? At that point, these people already said whatever they wanted to say, and their winning ticket and their opinion about the block are virally propagated over the entire network, and I cannot, more than any government can, put back what they said in the bottle, no more than the US government or anybody else can put back in the bottle a message virally propagated by WikiLeaks. So the system is secure because beforehand, I don't know whom I should corrupt, and ex post, it's too late to corrupt them. And at this general, I know that is a very general thing, but you can see that by proceeding in this unorthodox way is the solution to the trilemma. That's how we can reconcile decentralization, scalability, and secure. There is always a way. I mean, everybody in theoretical computer science likes impossible things. And we all know that impossible things fortunately exist, because if everything is possible, life is not interesting. But fortunately, the impossible things are much, much fewer than we think they are. And this is one of the cases. Okay. I have another question, and it's a very popular one indeed. But you said these Byzantine algorithms are very slow. You go, yes, but the previous ones, ours is very fast. It takes only a handful of steps, and in each step, all you have to do is to compute and propagate a single short and trivially compute message. And by the way, here is where Michael comes back, because essentially the Algorand Byzantine agreement algorithm uses a distributed variant of Michael's common coin protocol. Let me tell you, I had just joined MIT when I heard from Michael Benor his idea of using individual coins for reaching Byzantine agreement. And Michael Rabin improved by adding this other idea of transforming these individual coins in a common coin, which was set up by a trusted party. The trusted party only entered in the setup, and once he was there, you could have a series of common coins that allow to reach Byzantine agreement. I have no time to explain how, but it's a little bit intuitive that if you can agree on anything, even though you ultimately want to agree on the block or on the message, but if you have even a coin, a random object on which you agree, then everything else unravels and you can actually agree through the magic of this common coin. And this common coin, then my first PhD student, Pesach Feldman, and now in 1985, we somehow implemented by the players themselves without setup. So we are in the genealogical tree of a great line of work in distributed computation, at the heart of distributed computation, in Byzantine agreement itself. Wait a second. I have a third question, and then we entertain no more questions after that. And the question he says, I understood the answer to the first question, that you cannot corrupt people when they speak for the first time because you don't know who they are. And after they speak and be given, here is my ticket, here is my first message, I cannot stop this message because it's already propagated. But you said in answer to the second question that the Byzantine agreement, what did I hear, it takes a handful of steps. Well, if it takes a handful of steps, 2 steps are too many. Because the first time I don't know who they are and I cannot hijack them, I cannot corrupt them. But once I know who they are, I corrupt them. Their first message will be delivered, but the second, now I can control and let them speak whatever I want them to say. Not really. Why? Because the cryptographic selection of the player is so fast that we are going to select a separate committee for each step of the protocol. I understand, but this is nonsense. Why? What is a protocol but an intelligent form of discussion? And what kind of intelligent discussions can you have when 1,000 people get up and say something, the adversary comes, kills them all, no problem. A different random 1,000 people arise and they say the next thing. I kill them all, another 1,000 people. So these people, how can they have an intelligent discussion? And the point is that this Byzantine agreement that is so fast has an additional property that I never believed could really exist. I didn't define, but I was not alone. Nobody defined either. And that is player replaceability. What does that mean? Let me explain what player replaceability means by means of an example. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and a short video, amateur video, I'm afraid, is worth 1,000 pictures. Here we go. All right. So we have been fighting this adversary in distributed computation for a while. Our flags is in tatters, but still proudly fly. The enemy is in very strongly entrenched position, but in one last blitz, we are going to carry our colors across the field, like in the battles of old, and we will clear the field from the enemy. In so doing, we are going to suffer very heavy casualty. Whoever carries our colors may be killed, but like you've seen in many movies, somebody else pick up the flag, snatch the flags from the dying guy, and keeps on going forward. Ready? Protocol, charge. You see, different people carry the flag. No, the blue committee, red committee, purple committee, victory. Okay, that's how it works. So here is, we do not care who at the end has carried the flag. Our important thing is that the flag is carried over by different people each single time. We don't care. So we have different steps and different committees. So what is the relationship between these committees? That's a tricky question. None, because they are selected at random. They are different people. Well, occasionally, if you select 1,000 people, maybe one person is selected in 2 committees, but nobody knows about it. They are different people. And by the way, they are different numbers, because if you shoot for a cryptographic selection that gives you 1,000 players, sometimes you have 900 winners, sometimes you have 1,050, something like this. And they have no shared variable. And yet, they can talk like they are a single committee from beginning to end. And this is really being distributed. Okay, that's all I wanted to share about Algorand and its consensus architecture. I want to draw some conclusions. And there is a cycle in blockchain life, and it's actually a virtuous cycle. we are in reality and we get bored with reality. We don't like the world the way it is. We have set up a new goal. That's a good thing. At that point, we like the new goal. Say, oh, I had this new goal. Oh, yeah, we had it. So we start self-decepting ourselves, and the myth arises that a solution already exists. It is an important stage when suddenly we acknowledge it doesn't. We are not done. There is something more to do. Why this is important? Because once we realize that we are dealing with myth rather than reality, then we can get serious, roll up our sleeves, and go to technology to develop real solution. And once you get the technology with the power of our scientific community, it's only a matter of time until you find a solution that actually exists, is real, and now you enjoy a better reality. The example I spoke about is consensus, but the same cycle occurs to smart contracts, another great idea of blockchain. Interoperability, the latest rage in blockchain, that right now still people believe everybody interacts. I don't see how, but it's possible, and so on and so forth. So do not confuse myth and reality. It is actually a good start if you manage to separate them. And even though they seem to be very far and separated by a ditch, do not worry, because once you accept the reality, it's only a matter of time that technology will bridge myth and reality. So my take is that blockchains are sophisticated goals and require sophisticated technology. And speaking of technology, I believe that technology is quintessentially human. Never be afraid of technology. I mean, ever since we came down from the tree to forge our first tool, we became more, not less human. Technology is the creative realization of our human aspiration. It is our response to the increased complexity of the world we live in, the social world, the legal world, the financial world, even the physical world. And I believe that our survival as a species is going to hinge on our ability to develop ever more sophisticated technology. Technology has been our past, is our present, and will be our future. So, happy future. And in saying happy future, I also want to say thank you, Michael, because Michael has been a great man because I've always been focused on the future. He started talking about non-determinism when nobody talked about non-determinism. He cared about computation before computers ever occurred, and he has worked on probabilism, on the distributed consensus, and so forth, because he has a sense of this future. And so it is for people, with people like you, Michael, that we actually are going to enjoy our future. Thank you for paving the road. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Silvio. And since you mentioned Michael, if you can stop share your screen, I'll be able to bring Michael on board, I hope.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, let me see if here, I think I have it.
Michael, good to see you. Thank you very much, Michael. Very good to see, Michael. Thanks, Moshe. That has been a gift. And thank you all for paying attention. And more than that, thank you also, Michael Ben-Ors and the others for all of the attention that has been devoted, in particular by the Israeli scientific community, to distributed computation. And I think that that is a crucial field. And to me, to my amazement, we are a distributed organism. And our brain is a bunch of distributed neurons. But somehow, whenever we want to think about computation, we think, linearly. I don't understand why. So I'm very much, bullish on the power of working distributed with great resiliency and also great speed.
So we have some questions on the chat. Shiri, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
I think Ilan answered me, because earlier I wasn't sure about what happened if people generate a lot of accounts, but he mentioned that it's not by account. So each token has kind of a public-private key pair. So then it's not feasible to attack this way. But that was my question.
Okay, is a question or it was resolved? I seem to be...
It was resolved by Ilan. Thank you, Ilan.
Okay.
All right, very good. Yes.
Olga, do you have a question?
Actually, yes. Hello. I have a question about this winners of the lottery. What if, say, there is some number of corrupt winners and some number of honest winners? And for example, corrupt winners can see that they are, well, maybe not 1,000, but maybe 500 of them, right? And what if they decided to block other winners? I don't know how, but probably. These corrupt winners approve the next block because it is maliciously formed. And is there some minimal number of players who should approve this block, or this number may be?
Okay, so first of all, thank you, Olga, for your questions. So yes, there is going to be a threshold. And by the way, it's actually interesting how to choose a threshold. By the way, I also want to say that in the numerical example that you raised, somehow is 500 out of 1,000, it cannot really occur, right? So somehow I chose the numbers so that the probability to have, not a sufficient majority in the committee, the probability is 10 to the minus 18. 10 to the minus 18 is a strange number, and it is strange, and the reason it's strange is because I made it up. So, but let me tell you why I made it up, because 10 to the 18 happens to be 10 to the 18 without minus. It happens to be the number of seconds between the Big Bang and now. So another way to say it is that if you produce a block a second, which is pretty good clip, it's going to take you the age of the universe to see that somehow one committee has really the wrong thing. So, and as you said, that there is in fact a quorum necessary, but actually this quorum is actually important as some very additional positive side effects, and which are the following. Very often when people think about blockchain, they focus almost solely on an adversary who tried to corrupt the players. But a protocol is actually played on an underlying communication network, like our internet with routers and wires. Is a very physical object. And so somehow, if I were an adversary, When I cannot corrupt the protocol, because the protocol is well designed, I start messing around with the communication network, which may be much easier. You remember, the triumph of cryptography arose when adversaries no longer were attacking the crypto, but went back to breaking into offices because the math was no longer the easy way in, right? So similarly, so for instance, if an adversary were able, say, to disconnect, say, South America, one of the 5 populated continents, from the rest of the world, you can actually double spend in Bitcoin. And the reason of this is to say, even if, by the way, all miners are honest, so you don't need to corrupt them. You don't want to corrupt them at all. Everybody's honest. Why? Because assume miners are uniformly distributed over the world, and somehow, so a fifth of them are in South America, but they are now disconnected. I spend $1 billion, a billion tokens in South America, and I get, you know, goods and services. People say, well, not right away because the chain can fork. They wait. I say, okay, when is enough? At some point, you ship me the good. And then I spend 1 billion tokens in the rest of the world, and I disconnect South America. So now what happens? A fifth of the miners are in South America. The riddle has a given complexity. You solve it 20% of the time because you have 20% of a chance to solve the thing. So you have a car that proceeds at 20 miles an hour. In the rest of the world is 80% of the world. They proceed at 80 miles an hour. So pretty soon, the cars which proceeds 80 miles an hour, it goes much farther than the car that proceeds at 20. So 2 hours of this controlling the network, and then somebody discovers what's going on, puts back law and order. Then the South American guy wake up and say, gee, what we were doing? We were elongating the short part of the chain. Let's go and work on the longest, right? And so therefore the South America branch disappears, and my payment to them of 1 billion tokens is erased, is canceled. So in Algorand, by having a quorum, actually prevents this from happening, because 2 cases you cannot have a majority of this 1,000 to both in the outside world in South America. Maybe if you eliminate South America, you don't have a quorum anywhere, so the blockchain stalls. That's okay, because if in any distributed system, your communication network ought to work at least a little bit. So if everybody's put in a Faraday cage, nobody can send a message, nobody can receive a message, we stall. But if there is a majority, most probably there is in the rest of the world, and the chain continues, but the South American don't see any alternative chain at all. And when the network restores proper functioning, everybody continues to elongate the longest chain, and nobody loses money. So having a quorum somehow is helpful in many ways, and that's is exactly what is needed. Hope that helps. But yeah.
Thank you.
Daniel, do you have a question? Daniel Rotem.
Yes. My question is about the decentralization, because you said the probability of being chosen to a committee grows with the number of tokens you have. So doesn't this allow for a small group of people to own most of the tokens, like our economy at the moment in most countries? And that way, those people will have a lot more power to be in committees, and that essentially throws off the decentralization of the whole network.
Well, you know, we have to define decentralization. That is not really a democracy. It's not, you know, one person, one vote. Should this be out? So I would, maybe this economy will not work very well if everybody can say, I vote that your token become mine. So what you have here is paradoxically is going to be, it is in the interest of the people who have most of the token, even if they are few, even if there is one. Assume that I have all the tokens, okay, or I have 90% of the token. Then, you know, I am now completely invested in having a system that works well because I have 90% of it. So the fact that I misbehave is not in my interest, because assume that you are a painter. I see that you have an interesting picture behind you, and I want to buy your painting, and say, well, do you accept algos? Says, well, you know, I heard the bad press about algo with times, right? You know, it says I would prefer not to. So then what do I do with my algos? So nobody accepts them if I misbehave. So I don't want to endanger. So and the same is true, paradoxically, even though, remember, making sure that only the majority or a big chunk of the economy can sink the whole economy is really the key to security. Because in any other way, you are going to have, you know, this is an economy, is not, you know, a representative democracy the way we are assuming. So every token is equal to every other token, and the only security is that majority of tokens in the right hands. That means that. And the system is decentralized in that sense. And by the way, is also decentralized because should the tokens somehow be also distributed very widely, still the system works very, very efficiently. So I think it's a feature, actually. Yeah.
So just a question for clarification, Silvio. You talk about majority, but my recollection of Byzantine agreement that you need really a 2/3 majority, that if you have more than 1/3 bad guys, they can break the protocol.
Yeah. I was a bit loose on the majority. Yes. In fact, actually, you want to have also beef it up a little bit so that you don't have fringe cases on the thing. Yes. And by the way, when you ever talking about tokens, so it could be that if you have say 1 million tokens, maybe 3 tokens of yours won the lottery. So essentially, it's like if you have 3 votes in this committee. So having 1,000 tokens selected doesn't mean there are 1,000 persons in the committee. It can be that there are actually 600 people because some of them are enough and many tokens that multiple tokens of theirs have been selected. So you have somehow multiplicity of votes.
Thank you. If somebody else would like to ask a question, please raise your hand on Zoom. Going once. Going twice. If there are no more questions, then we are all now have officially tokens in Algorand. And let's all thank Silvio for a fantastic talk.
Guys, great to see you again, and hope to see you in person. You know, we still like each other in the flesh.
You know, there is an all Jewish phrase, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. I really hope
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Looking forward to it. Bye, guys. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Silvio.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.